So, welcome to the Live Better Connected podcast. Now, today I am pretty excited because we've got a fellow colleague of mine who is an expert in the whole of the telecoms gambit. He is Matt Howett from Assembly Research and recently published a report called The Value of Telecoms UK Services. And I really want to get into that today. So, firstly, welcome, Matt.
Hi, Gareth. Great to be here.
And just to give our listeners, Assembly Research, what do you do?
We're mostly interested in the regulation and policy that is affecting the telecom sector, but follow very closely anything coming from government, from Ofcom, and in particular, looking to put the sort of market developments in the context of what's happening in a kind of regulatory environment.
Excellent. And you've been a long sort of standing analyst of the mobile telecom sector.
Yes, so Assembly is 7 years old, but before that, I was working at another analyst company called Ovum for just over a decade. So I've seen a whole range of technologies. I remember 3G, which is obviously now getting switched off, and now we're talking about 6G. So fair to say that I'm a sort of veteran, I guess, already at this stage.
I think you definitely are. And I think we'll come on to some of the changes that have happened in the industry over that time. But you have released this report, The Value of Telecoms. And I think really sort of what I wanted to get into and really ask, because telecoms is essential to our daily lives. And certainly as we've gone through the pandemic, it has become even more so. I mean, in your view, where does telecoms sit in terms of how we really act as a society, how we engage with each other, but equally how we work?
Well, I think we all have come to realise how important connectivity is for our lives, whether that's fixed or mobile technology. And I guess, like you say, the pandemic really brought home for a lot of people. Not only is it a sort of fun thing for you to talk to your friends on social media and upload your TikToks and even listen to podcasts like this, but importantly to work and learn as well. Which clearly kept this country going during that difficult period from a few years ago. So I think we know how important connectivity is for consumers. And I think if you look at the research even that Ofcom puts out, it shows just this sort of insatiable appetite for data in particular that UK consumers have. Far surpasses things in other markets. We really are a connected nation that can't seem to get enough.
And that data increase, and as you say, sort of people relying on it during the pandemic, we were working from it. My kids were using school classroom through that, engaging with their teachers as well. And it really, you think, would that have been possible during earlier years? But that data increase, I think Ofcom, you mentioned sort of 40% year on year. What does that mean in terms of gigabytes? I mean, we sort of all think, you can rely on one or two, but I guess we've moved beyond that now.
Yeah, I think probably most consumers actually don't even think about how much data they are consuming. I think we're fortunate enough now to have packages which generally are unlimited in terms of the amount of data that you and I can consume. And really, I think that goes to show what a good deal that consumers get in the UK. Prices have been either flat or falling in real terms over time. And like you say, the amount of data that people are using is sort of increasing 40% year on year, which is an incredible number. And I guess what we tried to do with this report was trying to tell that story by explaining the price that people pay relative to what they actually get for it. The amount that they're using is being a good example of that.
Yeah, and we will come on to that. And but one thing, this data, we all get these gigabytes, we get 40% year on year. What's driving it? Because the mobile phone is a saturated market now. I think it's 95 million subscriptions in a market of 66 million people. What are the things, we hear the phrase, for instance, IoT.
Yeah, I think IoT generally is pretty low data. It's things that talk to networks and machine to machine, which is not that much data. The majority of it is coming from the consumer in terms of video that we are consuming. I think we're all probably addicted to some social media app, TikTok being a good example of the amount of screen time that people are now spending online. And clearly, a lot of that being video is a lot of data that goes through the network. And I guess in response to that, operators have had to invest significantly in fixed and mobile. I think £7.2 billion currently of investment to roll out those networks and to meet that increased usage that you talk about.
And I mean, you mentioned sort of 3G at the beginning there. We've gone through the iterations of 3G to 4G. We've now got 5G being rolled out at pace, and we're already talking about 5G standalone as well. And download speeds have come down as well. I think you can download with some phones, you can go out and there's already 300, 400 megabytes per second. So the service you're getting is significantly improving.
It is. And I think the thing that we tried to do with the report as well is show that it's kind of a unique industry and sector and a service for consumers whereby you're actually getting to use more. The quality of the product is improving as well in terms of the speed of the connection that you get. Whereas the price for all of that has not been sort of increasing at the same sort of rate or proportion. And therefore, the value that you get as a consumer is fantastic. The speeds that we're talking about have more than doubled in the last 6 years. But clearly, phone bills have not doubled over that same period.
And in actual fact, you could look at sort of the price of that those prices are coming down in some ways. I think in your report, you mentioned a gigabit of data, for instance, has fallen by 87%.
82% that has fallen, which, like you say, is an incredible number. And that is based on that usage and the speeds that consumers are enjoying.
So you're getting a better service for what you're paying?
Absolutely. I guess not only are you getting access to the new services over the top of the network, but you're enjoying more reliable networks in more places at faster speeds as well. So from a sort of consumer point of view, I'd say if you're in the UK, you're getting an incredible value at the moment from your provider.
And just to sort of elaborate on that value that you're getting, I mean, we hear a lot of sort of inflationary pressures, costs, in a society, a lot has gone up, energy prices have gone up. How does the telecoms industry sit within that?
It's a good question. I think the first thing to say, of course, is that the telecom sector is not immune to its own inflationary pressures. Of course, to make these networks possible and to deliver on those investments that the operators are making, there is a huge workforce of people. And we know that wage demands have gone up, and therefore, there have been inflationary pressures for the operators because of that large workforce that they have. They're, of course, also reliant on inputs to building these networks, the physical sort of bits and pieces that you need to put together to make this magic happen. And the prices of those have gone up too. So the raw input in terms of what you need to deploy a network, it has become more expensive. So I think you've got that on one side. I think if you look at sort of telecoms, if you like, as part of kind of a basket of services that the average household is consuming, it makes up a really small percentage. I think 3.5% in terms of the overall spend of a household is on communication services. But like we were saying at the beginning, the huge amount of things that you can do with that is about entertainment, but it's also about learning and ability to work too. So I think for a very small percentage, again, you get that sort of value story coming through.
And equally, the expectation of what you're getting and what you're paying for. You mentioned earlier about the sort of unlimited data packages that people are moving to. So it talks about the price of 1 gigabyte, but you look at most packages now, they're 10 gigabyte, 100 gigabyte, or in many cases, as you say, unlimited. So again, that's sort of, people are expecting more and more and more from these networks.
Yeah, that's very true. And I think one of the things we also look to do is put that in a kind of context with other industries. And we weren't really able to find examples of industries where the quality of the product is improved, where people can use more of it, yet the price of it either remains stable or falls in real terms. I think, if you look at other sectors, you use more of it, you pay more for it. And quite often, the quality of that has not been great, as we've seen, for instance, in water. So I would say that the telecom sector is quite unique in that respect. And again, points to the fact that people are getting a good deal.
Well, you mentioned water there, and I thought about this, and I thought it was fascinating. If we go back 40 years and I'm paying for a glass of water, I'm still getting a glass of water, even 40 years hence. But 40 years of change in telecoms, it's a vastly different network. And we are moving, even in the the fixed side of things. It used to be the public telephone, PSTN, the sort of old public exchanges. Now it's digital voice or voice over IP. Mobile phones, as you say, were originally just an analog, calling people. We used to have, my father had a car phone he was lucky to have in the early days, and it was so heavy, the thing was in the boot. But, we've moved now to very tiny devices that have the mobile world on. So, what you can get with one and the other, and equally, we've had massive investment that's going into that, which you mentioned in your report, sort of the kind of investment that we put on in the mobile industry, and that's paid for by the mobile industry. But in other industries, has that investment kept pace, and has that value kept pace?
I think we find not. So we look at electricity and we look at water as two examples. And I think you can look at water as an example where they are putting through huge investments to repair, again, infrastructure that is very old, has been around sort of since Victorian times, and clearly spending a lot of money in the same way that the telecoms industry is. But I think the consumer is not seeing that come through in terms of quality. I think we've all seen headlines about sewage going into rivers and the sea, which clearly is not a positive story of improved product for the consumer. We also see that I think some of those operators are looking to put through the majority of that spend on network upgrade directly to the consumer. And we kind of see what the average bill for a household would look like in terms of water if they do that. And again, it's sort of mind-boggling if you try to do the same in telecoms. The average bill would be sort of more than £300 a month, which is sort of 10 times something that it might be. So I think the consumer in telecoms gets that fantastic deal because they're seeing those investments go in and they're benefiting from that improvement in quality of product.
And again, your report sort of, I think, makes the point as well that you can shop around far easier in this sector. If you want to look for a cheaper contract, you can easily go that elsewhere. That there's a multitude of operators. They're not just the member operators of Mobile UK. They're each called virtual network operators, and overall there's a large amount of them, and that's simply not possible in other industries.
No, I think the degree of competition in telecoms and in the UK in particular is well known. I think you've got more than 150 MVNOs. I think in the UK, some of those substantially large operators that do exert a real pressure on the MNOs themselves. So I think you have got that competition between providers, which has again delivered good value to consumers and has pushed each other to go further in terms of investment in network and rollout of speeds.
And we've talked about the competition in the UK, and how do we compare with other countries? In terms of pricing, it seems to be, you see a lot in the papers that there's inflationary price rises, price contract rises. But from an international perspective, where does the UK sit in terms of what the value we get from that, and in pricing compared?
That's a great question, and I think if you compare the UK to other markets that we often get compared to, so France, Germany, Italy, Spain, the US, Japan, Korea as well, I think you'll find that the UK comes out on top in nearly every metric that we considered. I think we're joint with Spain in one instance, but it's about 5 pence they managed to beat us by. So I think if you look at it in that international context, it paints a fantastic picture. And it sort of goes to show that the work that Ofcom and others have done to create competition has delivered that benefit for the consumer.
And we talked about the value of the industry and that the product that you get out of that is improving. But equally, we come back to some of the things we started off with this, which is, we still are in a financially challenging time. There are measures of help that are out there. And I think your report suggested that the industry funds support measures to the tune of around £290 million, including social tariffs.
The 290 million excludes social tariffs. So this is measures that are in addition to what they've been doing to support people by offering those lower cost plans. So we've seen operators contribute to data banks, to subsidize lower cost handsets, to give away data to particularly priority groups of customers in order to try and alleviate the burden that they felt. A lot of this started during the early stage of the pandemic, but has continued And we calculate that that is currently around about £290 million a year. Around about 60 million of that is sort of for the most vulnerable in society, which is obviously a large proportion. So that is looking after those that really otherwise wouldn't have connectivity at all.
And some of those support measures you mentioned, data banks, device banks, this is where people get free data, often donated by customers and also the mobile companies themselves. And I mean, I was equally interested that is not supported by government. That is industry funded.
It is. That's entirely coming from operators' own back pockets. And I think, there is arguably a debate to have around how sort of sustainable the contribution to public policy objectives can be from an operator point of view. I think it's done with good intention, and there is belief that this will help people, like you say, get online to therefore be able to either shop around for cheaper utilities. So the good thing about telecoms is it allows you to save money elsewhere because you can use those price comparison tools. Obviously, people find work as well online, which helps them in situations that we might have been experiencing recently. So there is a great deal of sort of public policy work that the operators are doing without any kind of support from government. And I guess the question is how long you can maintain that.
And what, I mean, we talk about balance and sustainability. I mean, what kind of challenges are coming onto the industry that could put that into question? And as you say, there's a lot going on here in terms of support. Equally, we've talked about some of the investment that's going in, £7.2 billion per year, £290 million excluding social tariffs, and then I think it was 68 or something over and above that to provide that. How is that balanced? As you say, that there's certain questions. This is a public policy question.
Yeah, so there's still a big ask from the industry to invest and to continue to roll out. And we've seen that the commercial rollouts that have been happening in terms of fiber, but also in terms of 4G, 5G, and increasingly standalone 5G. As we get to the harder to reach parts of Britain, and we know that there are lots of those, the cost of that is very high, and the difficulty in doing so is real. So it kind of becomes more difficult for the industry and more expensive to connect those consumers. So I think the challenge is obviously squeezing them when they are trying to support as many people as they can through the support measures that they put in place. So you mentioned the 290 million. We also calculate there's sort of 62 million pounds as well of effective subsidy for the provision of the social tariffs that consumers have had access to as well, particularly in the last 18 months or so. So these are normal plans, but with a sort of lower price attached to them in order to help people stay online during the sort of financial hardship that we've seen at the moment.
And equally, you look at those social tariffs. I think it's worth pointing out if you look around as well, there are still market measures that are sometimes cheaper than a social tariff, and there are elements of often it's questioned about eligibility for social tariffs. Yet some people choose not to take them up because they've got bundled packages, or they have gone on, as you say, searched and found a cheaper package. I mean, my daughter's on a £6 a month package at the moment, for instance.
Yes, I think we've calculated there are around about 30 different social tariffs available at the moment, and they offer a whole range of different things. Some are purely mobile, some also include content even, and there are different price points as well that are available. You mentioned the fact that at the moment take-up has been fairly low. I think Ofcom report that it's currently around about 8% of those eligible can take a social tariff. But even at that 8% take-up, we calculate that the cost to the operators of effectively discounting that connectivity is more than £60 million. And if you want to encourage take-up of social tariffs, which I think policymakers and government in particular have been saying that they want to do, we modelled even if we reach 50% of take-up of social tariffs by those that are eligible, that 62 million a year would become 345 million pounds a year cost to the operator, which I think is clearly a huge amount of money that again is difficult to maintain over any sort of long period of time. So we kind of need to ask whether or not, we can continue sort of subsidizing things to that extent for an indefinite period.
I think putting it into context, for instance, that sort of those kind of figures, the shared rural network, which again is putting rural coverage into those areas that are hardest to reach, the industry is paying 532 million to upgrade those networks and extend that coverage. So these are large figures that we're talking about. I think one of the things that's got to be keen is you need a sustainable industry. It needs to be ensure that we can go. We've got a lot of investments, we say, going in. We're getting a better product that's coming out. People expect more and more and more, and that's because we're getting. I think devices now. They talk about we've got Meta, and it's headset, and you've got Apple. They've got a new VR. I don't think they call it VR, but certainly, it gives you that kind of mixed reality, extended reality. These things are again using more and more of this data, and it's not just those kind of things. It's just getting a bus, being able to check when it's arriving, or even ordering a cab, or as you say, I think some of the more important things, like access to jobs and access to education. So I think read a statistic today about, I think it was 80 to 85% of all jobs are now only put online. So this digital is really critical to society. I mean, I just get your impression sort of as we sort of get towards the end of this, but how important do you think it is that one, we recognise the value that it brings, but equally, we recognise also how important we need it?
Absolutely. I can't see us ever sort of moving away from this sort of attachment that we now have to our phones, but also, as you say, other devices too, that are going to completely transform the way that we interact, that we work and learn, I'm sure. And all of that requires, really good connectivity. So that means that the connection is available. It means that there is sufficient bandwidth there, and that speeds are available to support the kind of new applications and experiences that we don't even know about yet. So I think all of that has got to be there. Operators being asked to do it. They're also increasingly being asked to make sure things are resilient, so that in the case of natural disasters and even worse things, that those networks continue to function, and that requires even additional investment from the sector. So I think we just need to sort of be conscious of the sort of big ask that there is from the industry, and what they're doing to support all of the things that you and I quite enjoy doing when we're not working.
Well, I think you've painted a picture of what is a challenging environment, and one where I think the industry really is stepping up to that. It is investing heavily. We've got challenges. We're putting support out there as well. I think it's really interesting just to get that sort of look internally. I think often that isn't out there, and we see a lot in the media. It focuses specifically just on prices without understanding necessarily what the investment that's going in that produces that. And as we mentioned, comparatively, the UK being very competitive in terms of its pricing as well. And again, that's something that's not necessarily reported. Well, Matt, I mean, this has been really fascinating. I think I could really happily talk about this all day. It's been really opened up some areas that I don't think we've really explored on this podcast before. As I say, for anyone out there, we've got this the report that Matt and Assembly have put out, the value of telecom services in the UK. There it is. Please do ensure that if you want to look at that, and there's a lot to learn on there. For everyone, thank you again for listening once again. Thank you for Matt. We're going to be releasing further podcasts. We've got a really interesting one coming up in the future on the Port of Tyne. And again, if you want to make sure you get alerted to this, please do subscribe. And again, follow us on our usual channels on mobileuk.org. Thank you.